Okay, everyone, we are still on Chapter 1. I did an introduction PowerPoint from Chapter 1, but now I am really diving into the specific theories that you read about in Chapter 1 and that you will have on your upcoming assignment, where you will be matching the theory to the theorist. Okay, so what you read, and on page 28, just for reference, there is a great infographic about perspectives in child development, and it sort of breaks down these very complex, convoluted theories into these little bites, if you will, a little cheat sheet, actually, of what each theory consists of. So if you want to look at that, again, that's on page 28 through 29, but I think it's super important that I walk you through them and we talk about the tenets of each so that you really understand it. Now, when I'm teaching this in person, I divide the class up into different groups, small groups of 3 or 4, and then I assign a perspective or a theory of development, and then I have the students teach it to the class, and it's very valuable. So I apologize that there will be something missing in that you're just going to be reading about the theories and having to listen to me. However, some of these theories will permeate all that we do throughout the entire semester, so I will continually reference them. And every time I reference them, I will refer back to this lecture or this chapter so that you can sort of full circle back into the understanding. Okay, so this is a general list and outline, the theories of development. The first one you read about is the classic, everybody's favorite crazy theorist, Freud. This is the psychoanalytic perspective, and there's actually 2 main theorists that we think about when we think about the psychoanalytic perspective, and that is Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson. What the psychoanalytic perspective focuses on is really the nature, this internal unconscious force that drives us and drives our development. And basically, this postulates that all of our behavior is motivated by memories or conflicts, which we have little or no awareness or control over. And all of these conflicts stem from something that happened in our childhood and then thus influence the behavior throughout our lifespan. So Freud's specific psychoanalytic theory is that a person's unconscious contains infantile wishes, demands, and needs, and that our personality is fixed by age 5. Now here's a little fun fact. A long time ago, before a child was adopted, adoption agencies wanted children to be adopted at age 5 or later so that the child had a chance to develop and grow their personality so they could see if they were a good fit with the parent. Well, now what we know from child development is that attachment means earlier the better. So if adoption is something a child is going to go through and a parent, it is better to do it earlier. Freud also said that children go through psychosexual stages. Those are in the book, and I have those listed out in this PowerPoint as well. He said that if the issues are not resolved at a certain age, fixation can occur. He says that this is why children suck their thumb, have different issues in life, or have what is aptly named as a mommy complex, that young boys have an unresolved issue with their fathers because they see them as competition with their mothers. Different oral fixations or habits like biting your nails and smoking are all because of these unresolved issues that usually stem around the child and the mother. And then he talked about the famous id, ego, and superego. I will let you read about those here, because again, I'm trying to keep my videos to 15 minutes to keep your attention. Now, this psychoanalytic theory, there was Freud, and then shortly after him came a protege, Erik Erikson. And he had a real emphasis on the social interactions as this sort of interplay with unconscious, hereditary, inborn traits and subconscious issues that humans go through. So he said that it's society and culture that also help shape the child, and that understanding ourselves and one another over time is critical to understanding child development. And he basically said that there are 8 stages in a child's life, and they have these crises that they need to resolve in order to successfully move to the next stage. I have all of those stages here. I am not going to go over each stage just for time, but please read those. I have videos. You will notice right here are these links. From the PowerPoints that I will post to Canvas, you can click right on these links or copy and paste and enter them into your browser. Okay, let's move on. Another perspective of child development is the learning perspective, and that states that learned behavior or responses are the keys to understanding a human development, or a human or child's development. Behavior is a result of continuing exposure to certain factors in the environment. Nurture is more important than nature in this perspective, and it rejects the notion that people universally pass through these stages. Developmental milestones are personal and a product of one's own environment. We have behaviorism. That is under the umbrella of the learning perspective, and that states that behaviors are acquired through conditioning, and conditioning occurs through observation and learning through association. And only observable behaviors should be studied. So behaviorism is really focused on things like stimulus and response. And these types of conditioning are referred to as classical and operant. So classical conditioning, I'm going to give it to you quickly. This is really hard to digest online in these quick little vignettes that I'm giving you. Again, I go over them in great detail face-to-face, so I apologize for this online format, but it is what it is. But again, everything that I'm lecturing on, I have these videos right here that you can watch, which are just sort of little references to what you read. It's important that you read and then sort of see the theory in action. So these videos are a really great way to help you understand the theories that I'm presenting, and I really highly encourage you to watch them. Okay, so classical conditioning, it's a form of learning in which the response associated with one stimulus comes to be connected with another. And when neutral stimulus repeatedly paired with a second stimulus, it elicits a conditioned response. These are involuntary or automatic responses to a neutral stimuli. The classical conditioning theory states that if you can control a person's environment, you can control and predict their behavior. One very, very famous example of this is Pavlov's dogs. And I have the video for that there. I also have these really great info and picture graphs that would make more sense if we were in person, but it'll be too long for me to explain them here, but I promise you will get the content in other ways. So I am going to breeze past them, but all of these PowerPoints in their full length are available to you on our Canvas account. Okay, so we had classical conditioning, now we have operant conditioning, and this is all still under the umbrella of learning theory. So it's a form of learning in which the response associated with one stimulus is strengthened or weakened by its association with positive or negative consequences. The response here is involuntary as opposed, the response is voluntary as opposed to involuntary with classical conditioning. So learning is actually trial and error. The main theorist here was Skinner, and he believed in reinforcement and punishment. And I apologize on this slide, I have left out the punishment, and I don't know why, but I will explain it in a second. So for reinforcement, it's any stimulus that increases the frequency of the behavior that they follow. Positive reinforcers, negative reinforcers. So positive reinforcers, when something is applied, it increases the frequency of the behavior. Negative reinforcers, something is removed, it increases the frequency of the behavior. So something important, super important to note, is that positive and negative in this situation doesn't mean good or bad. Positive means something is given, increased, applied, and negative means something is taken away. But all of it has the goal of increasing a behavior. And some of you have read and you're listening to me and you're thinking, what on earth does that mean? All right, so let me give it to you in these short little anecdotal examples. So if we're talking about reinforcement and you want to increase the frequency of a behavior, so you want your child to do the dishes, don't we all? When you give a positive reinforcement, you are adding something. So they're doing the dishes and you say, oh, that was so lovely, Claire. Here's a hug. Here's a pat on the back. You can get candy. Here's your reward. Here's your allowance. But then there's a negative reinforcement. It doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. It just means you can take something away and still increase the likelihood that the behavior will still happen. So we still want the child to do dishes, but you can take away homework and take away more chores if they do the dishes. I know some of you are sitting there going, that doesn't make any sense. Again, this is why you can reach out to me personally while we have our Zoom meetings, we have the assigned readings, and we have these PowerPoints, all to hopefully help bring it home for you and gain a better level of understanding. Let's see, punishment is different than reinforcement. We could have positive punishment and a negative punishment. Now, let me be clear, semantics is hard here. In child development, developmentally appropriate practice, punishment is not okay. So I want to be very clear here as I'm clarifying my example. So let's say the behavior is a child is now not doing the dishes. They are refusing to do the dishes. So you can give a positive punishment. You can add more chores. You can spank them or give them a timeout, which, by the way, all those are a punishment, and those are not developmentally appropriate, but we'll get to that later. Or you can do a negative punishment, so you can take something away. So the child is not doing dishes, and then you take away their TV privileges or their iPad privileges, or they don't get dessert that day, or no video games, whatever it is. So here's the two differences. And again, on your Match the Theories assignment, you will be asked this. Again, it is in the book, and I have it for you here. Then classical and operant. So classical is involuntary, and operant is voluntary. With classical, there is no reward. No outward reward, at least. And operant conditioning, there is a reward. Classical is passive, operant conditioning is active. Classical means there's no action on the subject, no conscious action, whereas operant conditioning, the subject is actually acting on their environment, so there is action. And then again, I have a wonderful video here that you can check out. Let's see, and now we have also under the learning perspective, we had behaviorism, we talked about that, and now we have social cognitive theory. And that states that learning comes through observation and imitation of another person's behavior or a model. So learning isn't trial and error. There don't need to be these physical or tangible rewards or punishments because the child can actually observe a behavior and imitate it. Let's see, again, I have another video, but let me move forward. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to go back. And again, I'm not going to edit these videos. I'm just going to keep talking because it's a lot easier for us, and this is real life. My children might pop into the frame, my cats might pop into the frame, and that's just life. So let's see, because I know there's something I really wanted to get to here. So children and adults don't need to experience the consequences of a behavior in order to learn it. So going back to the slide before, let's say doing the dishes. Okay. So if we're talking about the social cognitive theory, let's say a little sister sees the big sister doing dishes, and she sees that this other child is getting candy and hugs and all of these rewards to do the dishes. So that child is more likely to emulate and replicate that behavior because they have seen the great rewards that their sibling gets. So they have imitated the behavior of another, or what we call the model. On the same note, if they see the child get privileges taken away or they are spanked, they are less likely to not do the dishes. Or to make that not a double negative, they are more likely to continue to do the dishes because they have watched their sister get in trouble. Let's see. Okay, there's a video there. Basically, the differences between behaviorism and social cognitive theory is behaviorism relies on conditioning. There's classical or operant of certain stimuluses and responses. And basically, the environment is acting on the subject. Social cognitive theory relies on purposeful imitation and modeling. So the subject acts on the environment and vice versa. Okay, and my time is going to run out, so I'm going to stop there. But in our next PowerPoint, I will continue with the other theorists.